Hi, everybody. Welcome to our on pit road NASCAR race rewind for the race last Sunday at Dover, the FedEx 400 for Autism Speaks. I'm joined by my friend, cohort, and NASCAR fantasy racing expert Dan Beaver. Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing great.
All right, that was an interesting race. I mean, Dover. I have a bias towards Dover because I like the track, I like the uniqueness, and like the shortness of the track, the 1 mile concrete stuff. It's all kind of unique. But that was a really interesting race. Some interesting stuff happened in the race that wasn't really related necessarily to racing. But what did you like the best, and what was most significant to you? First of all, Jimmie Johnson won his second consecutive win after winning at Charlotte and ending his terrible, drought. And now he's the guy to beat again. So.
Yeah, he went from being people wondering whether or not he would make the chase if there were enough winners to being ranked #1 because he's high enough in the points and has 2 wins. So
Right.
in a 2 race period, he goes from GOAT to hero just nonstop. All those people who thought they had some just a little brief hiatus from his domination, that's all they got.
Yeah, the haters are back at it.
And I was just as bad. I was saying that it was getting time for him to worry about it if he didn't start winning in those next couple of races.
Yeah, we
And
actually
he
kind of
did.
called that. We actually kind of called that on the on pit row hangout, saying that it was a time to worry. This was the week before Charlotte, or 2 weeks before Charlotte. I said, I think, yeah, 2 weeks from Sunday. If he hasn't done something then it's time to be seriously concerned.
Yeah, but when you talk about momentum, nobody knows where it starts, nobody knows how it ends. It's amazing how often something like that happens. A switch is flipped. It's not that he won back-to-back races for the 13th time in his career. It's that he was somewhat irrelevant up until Charlotte, and then went
Hmm.
from irrelevant to relevant seemingly overnight
He
in
went
the
to
FedEx 400.
went from
See what I did there?
irrelevant to dominant too. And looking at the lap stats, I mean, Jimmie Johnson obviously led the most laps by a long way. The driver who was closest though, with about 75 laps led, was Kyle Busch, and Kyle got taken out in a in a kind of a fun event midway. Well, about a third of the way through the race, I guess.
Yeah, it probably wasn't fun for Kyle Busch.
No, it was not. It
But
was fun to watch on TV though.
there are very few times that I laugh out loud watching a NASCAR race. But the image of Clint Boyer coming back around, diving underneath whoever the white and blue car was, playing hide and seek while Bush is on the other side. The Bush slows down,
Hunting
goes
him.
behind the white and blue car, starts chasing him. I, all the time the spotter's going, Kyle, stop! You can't do this! Stop! Stop!
And
uh,
then
it
Boyer
was
speeding up and getting out of the way. That was great theater there.
it was like a rabbit just shot up to the front. NASCAR can penalize me for this if they want to, but I'm getting out of here.
So,
Like I said,
so,
probably
so
wasn't
that did make it
particularly.
interesting at the beginning of the race. I didn't hear myself. I didn't hear Kyle's comments after the race, but he obviously felt wronged on the racetrack.
Yeah, and you can't really just blame it on the spotter. The driver has the wheel. Spotter cleared him. He went up, but he sometimes you can't always trust the spotter, I suppose.
Right.
What I didn't know is that the spotter for Clint Boyer is Matt Kenseth's spotter in the Nationwide Series. So, wondering
That
if
could
he's still
get
going to have any
interesting.
employment with Joe Gibbs.
Well, that could get interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the other thing we normally this recap is about the Sprint Cup race every week, but I think it's worth giving a shout out since we are talking about Kyle Busch before we get off of Kyle, that he did win a Camping World Truck race and a Nationwide Series race at Dover as well during this weekend, and looked like he had a legit shot at sweeping the weekend if he hadn't maybe run afoul of Boyer.
No, and you gotta, whether you're a Kyle Busch fan or not, you gotta root for storylines sometimes, and
Oh,
that would have been a cool storyline. I think it would have been the third time he's done it in a weekend, second time with a track. I think he's done it in various tracks once, and he did it at Bristol once, if memory serves.
I know he's done it at least one time at the same track, and you're right. But I think it might be two. I think this might have been the third time if he had done it. Not positive about that, but yeah, he has. I was at Texas one time when it looked like he was going to be able to sweep it and couldn't close the door on the Cup race. His brother actually knocked him out of that sweep, but
yeah,
that was an interesting weekend too. So anyway, that was fun. What wasn't so much fun was 2 red flag periods during this race, which made what should have been maybe a 3.5-hour race 6, something like that. It was a long day.
Well, we may have talked about this last week. We may not have. I like long races, so I say bring back.
But I don't want to watch Darrell Waltrip for
That's
hours
true.
and 2.5 hours.
I like long races from this point of the season on. And NASCAR found a way to get that kind of the feeling of a 500-mile race with the 2 red flags.
Mm-hmm.
The Jamie McMurray incident was just another bit of bizarre happenstance.
That was very bizarre, and it's funny because you and I were kind of communicating on Twitter. I was watching the race, but I was somewhere where I could not hear the commentary of what that happened, and I told you I thought it looked like he hit like a bottle of pop or a can of beer or something on the racetrack. That's what it looked like from the camera angle that I saw it from, and I'm like, how could that do that much damage to that car?
Yeah, well, how did it not do as much damage as it did, I guess, is even a better question, because he only lost 1 lap making the repairs, and he slapped the outside of the wall pretty hard, too.
Yeah, he did.
In reference to what it was, the TV commentators thought the same thing. It looked like liquid had sprayed up.
Yeah.
But where the can couldn't have come from anywhere. There aren't any stands on the outside of the track there. The infield's far enough away that no one. So
and the track's banked so much, it's like you'd have to stand it out there. You couldn't throw it from the stands and have it stay in one place. It'd be rolling down to the apron. So yeah, it wouldn't make any sense.
But that just it pulverized that and knocked a hole in the walkover gate. And that's the second time that the track's come up and affected one of the leaders, or he wasn't leading at the time. I think he was running back around 15th or so. Had just made a remarkable pass on Casey Mears with a great slide job. 2 laps later, boom.
Yeah, yes, bad break. Bad break. But they did a good job of fixing the racetrack. It's amazing to me that they can do that, because that place where the hole in the track was, everybody was hitting it almost every lap.
Yeah.
So it was under duress the rest of the race.
Yeah, and we've seen that epoxy not stand up that well in the past. So I expected that they were going to have to red flag it again another 200 laps down the road, and or I think it was on lap 160, another 150 laps down the road and fix it. And they either improved the epoxy or they just knew what to do with it this time.
Yep. So, but then we did have a race, and it finally did finish. And Matt Kenseth, so close again.
So close. And running second on that last restart, got pushed back to third by Keselowski in the last 4 laps, 5 laps, something like that. And these were his 2 best opportunities to win for a while. Charlotte and Dover. You would hope that he could come back and run just as strong, but it might not make any difference since those 2 races are in the chase. Charlotte second race, Dover second race. Kenseth, you're kind of in the same category where Johnson was concerned. He didn't start winning soon. It's going to be time to worry about him. But the difference with Kenseth is he doesn't have certain tracks where he's always expected to dominate. He just has some weekends when he dominates. So that team just really needs to click on all cylinders for 1 or 2 weeks and run well.
If he were still running a Roush Fenway Ford, I'd be giving a call out saying if he doesn't do it at Michigan in 2 weeks, it'd be time to definitely chalk it up as maybe a lost season. But Joe Gibbs teams don't have the same kind of history at Michigan that Roush does. So I don't know that you can say point at Michigan and say, yeah, I expect Kenseth to be one of the top 5 guys there, although he probably will be.
Well, they don't, but they haven't been all that bad either. If you look at the 2-mile tracks combined, Kyle Busch has won the last 2 races at Auto Club. The banking's 4 degrees less in Auto Club than it is at Michigan, but they still race pretty much exactly the same. And then Kyle Busch finished 4th in this race last year. Kenseth had a 6th in this race last year, and was 4th at Auto Club. So there's some hope there. I think Joe Gibbs won't be terrible, and if Hamlin can get out of the slump that did get out of the slump with his Dover top 5, I think it was, and can have another strong run this week at Pocono, he could become a threat next week at Michigan.
Any other surprises in the FedEx 400 top 10 or bottom 10? Anything that got you there?
No, I think the surprises came at the very end. Clint Boyer, after having the run-in with Kyle Busch, the fact that they could make that repair and getting back up there, so he scored a top 5. Tony Stewart scoring a 7th, and Martin Truex in 6th. Paul Menard in 10th. All of those were some pretty strong runs that kind of came together for the most part in that last segment of the race.
And I think all 3 of those guys had the benefit of a crew chief making kind of a Hail Mary call, 3 stops back from the end, going with 2 tires at one point and getting track position that they were able to hold on to for most of the end of the race.
Yeah, and a couple of drivers fading a little bit. Kyle Larson was running pretty well. He faded back to 11th. It looked like he's going to have a top 10. Jeff Gordon, they got the...
Yeah, we talked about this before we went on the air. What happened there?
Yeah, I don't know, but something... it'd be nice if they would tell us what happened. I suspect something had to have broken. They couldn't have made a change that made him that much worse. But you also had 2 restarts in the last 40 laps, and Jeff Gordon is famously bad on restarts. So he would have gone. He almost certainly would have dropped from. Came out in 6th, following this next to last caution flag. Dropped 2 positions, another 2 positions after that before the next caution came out, and then he just got shuffled again. So how much of it was the bad setup? How much of it was his inability to restart? He usually dropped from 3rd to 15th without something happening on the car. And I don't think they could have screwed up the setup that badly on one stop that they couldn't get it back. He would have thought they'd just go back to what they had before that stop and get him better. And he just never got any better in those last 40, 50 laps.
Okay, well, while we wind up our talk about the first race at Dover this year, this was the last race for the Fox crew to cover Sprint Cup this year. You going to miss them at all?
I'm not a real big fan of Fox's coverage. I like Darrell Waltrip I loved him as a racer. It's just their coverage is, I don't know. They've got on one of their other channels they've got Who Wants to Marry Harry, and that sense of seriousness or lack thereof kind of carries over into their sports coverage as well. This is my favorite part of the season.
I agree. The thing that bothers me the most, and I don't really have anything against the guy, is there's too much Michael Waltrip in the Fox Sprint Cup coverage. And it bothers me somewhat that he's a team owner. He's an active team owner, and sometimes driver in the series, and he's there bringing the story to you. I just find there's some integrity issues there for me.
It wouldn't bother me too much if he said anything I wanted to hear, but...
Well, that's the other part. He's just a clown.
Yeah. But this is my favorite. This is my favorite group. Wally Dallenbach, Kyle Petty. I think they're 2 of the best broadcasters in the business. So TNT's 6-race series always been one of my favorites. I really wish they'd hired them at NBC for next year, but I don't think they have. I think they settled on. I don't know who's going to be in the booth, but
Steve would know that. I'm not the media guy. All
right,
right,
I think we have something to look forward this week to this week because they're so good.
Yeah, and Pocono is really the perfect track for that team, I think. Dallenbach's very good at communicating what it's like to be on those kind of racetracks. Kyle Busch or Kyle Petty, I think, is terrific. I agree with you there. And I don't even remember who their announcer guy is, but it'll be good.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll do this again next week. We'll talk about Pocono. And thanks for listening to us. This has been our NASCAR Race Rewind on Pit Row. I'm Charlie Turner. He's Dan Beaver. And follow Dan on Twitter at Fantasy Race and me at On Pit Row. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.